All right, all right, all right. It is a little bit after 3, and I guess I'm ready to go ahead and go live. So if you're tuning in and you want to say hi in the comments, I always begin that way, but please feel free to say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And I know I always like to see that just to see who is out there. Yeah, all right. So today's Monday. I took the weekend off from working in the little journal. And so I'm kind of coming back to it kind of fresh and really just kind of excited to dig back into a new week of working. So um, as always, if you want to kind of follow along, you can kind of use what I'm doing as inspiration. Or if you want to just kind of work on your own, or if you just kind of like watching, just appreciate you being here. So anyway, up until this point, been doing a lot, building a lot of layers, starting to kind of get some meaning behind it. And for me, it's kind of like things slowly emerge. Sorry, I had to kind of say that. The whole point of this journal is that idea of emergence. And so meaning comes along, like, even though I have that theme in mind, even though I'm kind of thinking about that big idea for my journal, it's taken me a while to kind of get to what this journal is about. And I'm still not there. I mean, maybe it never will be. I think that's part of the discovery process that I really like about art. So today I do want to work a little bit more with words and a little bit more with meaning and things like that. So I am going to kind of dive in. See that Francis is joining us. Thanks for joining us, Francis. I don't do sessions over the weekend, so you didn't miss anything. Just I want to do this as just on the weekdays. So every weekday, not on the weekend. So anyway, but I am so glad that you can join us. And yeah, so today I'm going to work a little bit more with words, with maybe establishing more of the message, the meaning. And we'll kind of see how it goes and see what I get up to. All right, so let me go ahead and switch this over. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, pop them in the comments. Let's go ahead and switch this over. All right, so I've got my little journal, of course. I pulled out a few things. I pulled out a couple pages of that book. I'm going to maybe do something with the text today, more specific than I have. And then I've got the writing. I got the rest of that writing. You remember I was cutting, if you tuned in, I forget which day it was, probably during that first week, I ended up cutting some of the text off and gluing it through. And so the words kind of go from page to page in the book. So I might use some of that. I pulled out a photocopy that I have, and this is just a photocopy of magnetic poetry. So I don't know if you remember magnetic poetry. Sorry, I just got distracted. Francis said that she knew there weren't any sessions over the weekend. She just missed them. So that's sweet. Thanks. Anyway, it's magnetic poetry. I ended up sticking it to a cookie sheet a long time ago. This was years and years ago. And I scanned it into the computer. And so I have it as a file now. I can kind of print it out. And I like it. I like the fact that it's in these little rectangles. So I might cut out some of those and use those. So just scanning in, I have a whole set. I actually have multiple sets of magnetic poetry. I used to have it all over my fridge. And then I eventually just took it all down. And of course, I didn't want to get rid of it. And so it's in a box in my studio, but this is just great. I pulled out different words I've kind of felt like were like pretty good words. And so I might use some of those. And then I pulled out some scraps of paper, and I was thinking like it might be interesting to write words on here and kind of glue them in. So I don't know exactly what I'm going to get up to today, but it is going to be just sort of yeah, we'll just kind of see. I really don't know. That's kind of sometimes the beauty of working in the journal. So it's been 10 days. So 10 days I've worked on this, slowly building up layers. And, I've used some words, and then the images start to kind of create some meaning. And one of the things I thought about, and I mentioned this like right from the beginning, was that idea of emerging, and but using the cicadas, because here where I am in Northern Virginia, we have the big 17-year brood 10. I've heard people say brood 10 or brood X, and they're the cicadas that come out every 17 years, and so this is supposed to be, where millions of them come out. And unfortunately, none of them have emerged around my house. But I imagine they will soon as the temperatures get a little bit warmer, but they are starting to emerge around here. And so I thought, well, I need to find some cicada images. And so I'm definitely going to do that to use later in the week. But yeah, so the images, the words, yeah, just kind of, sometimes I think with the pages, especially like looking at these beginning pages, that there's like meaning and messages that aren't so explicit, so like in your face, like this is what this means. And I kind of like that, but I do want to kind of focus a little bit more on the words. So I'm just kind of flipping through, because I think I want to start with the text. I'm just trying to find a good place to do that. I'm thinking, well, I've kind of, since most of these other pages really already have a lot going on, it looks like I'm going to kind of move into here, which is totally fine. So let me find that. So I could just kind of glue in an entire page and cover, but I'm going to do kind of similar what I did before. So when I first started doing this a couple weeks ago, and I first started using some collage, I just cut the text into some thinner strips. I'm going to do it a little bit thicker this time. And so that notion that it's going to kind of cover up a little bit more of the page, which is fine. And trim this off. So an easy way to measure how long I need to cut it is to lay it down, line it up with the top, and then just come down here at the bottom and just rub. And because I've got lots of layers there of pages, I get a nice crease where the end of the page is. And then I can just cut right on that. Okay, so anyway, that's going to get, I think I'm going to glue that there since it already has a little bit of a background. My glue paper. Now the question is, which way do I want to glue it in? So I'm just kind of looking, because I'm going to look at the words. I'm thinking, yeah, let's get them glued in this way. So put glue on this side. So when I used this text earlier, these pages from a book, when I used that earlier in this process a couple weeks ago, I really just did it as a way to create some texture. I like using text, because it really implies words, even though whenever I flip back and look at the text in here, I don't sit and read it, so I don't sit there and read these little bits. I just see it more as texture. So again, I don't sit there. Maybe a word will pop out at me, but I don't really read it. I see it, and it's more of a visual texture. But I do want to kind of use this text, and I'm going to use a technique that it's the notion of found words or found text. And so, I didn't come up with this. This is from a book. But there could be really interesting kind of words and phrases. And if I link them together and kind of start to create sentences, phrases, sentences, and then eventually like poems, we can call it blackout poetry. So the idea of blackout poetry, if you're not familiar with it, is that you take a piece of text like this, whether it's from a book, newspaper, magazine, whatever, and you use all of it or part of it, and you find words and phrases that when they get linked together, they start to basically create a poem. And what you do is typically you black out. So any of the words that you don't want to use, you just black them out. You go over them. You use a big thick black pen or marker, and you can kind of go over them. Austin Kleon, the writer Austin Kleon, does this a lot. But he's not the one that invented it. It's been around for a while. But it's just really interesting to pick out words. So you don't have to link the words to create a sentence or a phrase, but it can be kind of interesting to try that. I don't black them out. What I do is I just usually just draw a little rectangle around it. And so I'm just going to kind of look through and find words or phrases that I feel like really kind of stand out. If they do link together, it might be interesting. So I might try that. But I'm really just looking for words and kind of thinking about emergence. Is there anything in here that's kind of starting to like hint at that or not hint at it or sort of relate to it. So anyway, I'm just going to go through it. I just see this word evident, kind of found that interesting. And so what I do is I just draw a little rectangle around it. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to kind of think about this and go through and find certain words and phrases and see what comes up. So I've gone through and I found, words and one phrase. They don't actually link together to create any kind of comprehensible poem or sentence, but you can go through and you can actually link the words together to create something that's a little bit more comprehensible. But I just like some of the words and phrases that came up. So there's a phrase, afraid of hurting. Okay, that just got me thinking about like, okay, if this is all about emergence, about things that I'm going through now, something new is emerging. Well, maybe I'm afraid of something. Maybe there's if part of my life is opening up, are there things that I'm afraid of? And so that all of a sudden I thought about a question about afraid. But then the words suffering, sympathy, amazement, believe, reverence all kind of came up too. And I really like some of those words. So again, they don't link together to create any kind of poem, but they're big words. They're things that maybe I wouldn't have written about. I mean, I don't think I've ever really written about reverence. Some of the other words definitely I've written about, but haven't come up in the writing so far that I've done. Um, so this becomes a way for me to think about things and find new words. So anyway, I want to, so typically with blackout poetry, you would sit and you would take a black pen and you would black out all the other words around it so that all you're left with are the words that you chose. I like to do it a little bit differently. I like to keep the words so you can see them, but yet bring more emphasis to the words that I've selected. And if you've seen me do this before, it's pretty simple. I take paint, or most often my Inktense pencils. And I'm thinking I want that one color that I really like, that Shiraz. I always have to remember, like, how, is it a small pencil? Is it a large pencil? And sometimes I take them out, lay them on the table, and then can't find them. I think right here it is. Nope, that's brown. Get too many, like, that are my favorites, and I can't really find the other ones. Okay, well, maybe I won't be using the Shiraz. I'll have to find that. I may have. Oop, I found it. I stuck it in a cup over on the side. So anyway, this collage is, it doesn't feel cool. So I'm thinking that it may have dried enough, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the hair dryer. I know sometimes people are like, well, why do you dry collage? And using the glue stick, even though it's a low moisture, it can still affect, especially the Inktense pencils. When the paper's damp, it doesn't really draw or write on it very well. So you really want to have really dry paper, or you could do this on really wet paper, and there's some interesting effects that happen. So I'm going to go ahead and mute this, and then I'll dry it, and then I'll come back. All right, so I just hit it real quick, and hopefully that should be enough to have it dry. Um, so I just take my pencil like I've done before, and I shade around. And so this color covers the words, but it doesn't completely obscure them. And I'm not worrying about coloring over every single word. By having this darker color around it, and then lightening up the pressure and the value as it goes away, these words will stand out. The rest of the words will kind of blend into the background. And then, I just thought of something. So I've usually, when I use water-soluble pencils, I just use plain water. However, you can use paint. So I'm going to switch over. I'm going to grab some paint. I'm going to use this yellow. The Shiraz is kind of a reddish, brownish, slightly violet kind of color, but I found that it goes really well with a real bright yellow. So I'm going to get some of this yellow on my brush, and then that way the yellow and that Shiraz are going to blend together. And I rinse my brush before I get more paint. That way I don't contaminate the paint. So this is just another way of using water-soluble pencils. So whether it's the Inktense or whether it's water-soluble graphite, you can do this with water-soluble graphite or the watercolor pencils. And it doesn't matter, like I have the Inktense paints, but it works just as well with any kind of watercolor, even inexpensive watercolors. It's just a way that I can add a little bit more color mixing and blending into the piece. But the one thing that I do is I want to use a contrasting color. Oftentimes I'll see, especially whenever I teach kids, high school kids, little kids, and you show them this, you're like, oh, you can use the watercolor and you can use the watercolor pencil. And then they'll do a red watercolor pencil, and then they grab red paint. And it's like, okay, red plus red equals red. And it's like, do something different. I know that red and yellow make orange. So in this case, that Shiraz is kind of reddish, but I don't get like a real bright orange whenever it mixes, but it's still kind of orangey. Goes in, it blends in with the colors that I have already on the page. So then I end up with, color and paint and such on all parts of that text, except for those little rectangles that I drew in. Now I could do something similar. I could have just painted plain water over the pencil, let it dry, and then put the paint over top. It would have looked very similar, but there's something about allowing the paint to blend in with the pencil that's really kind of interesting. Then I blended some of that paint and such over onto the brain. So now that brain has a little bit of color on it. And I'll go ahead and dry this, and then we'll move on. Okay. All right. So that's kind of cool. So gotten some more words in there, thinking about how some of this might play in. I'm going to jump back. I'm not sure if I want to use my writing, but I think I want to use the magnetic poetry words. And so kind of thinking where I might want to use them. So I think with these, I'm going to, actually, there's the word crack. That's really interesting. But what was really interesting was that over the weekend, somebody posted a comment on the YouTube video. So I take these videos, I record them, of course, and then I post them on YouTube for people who don't have Facebook. And somebody mentioned that, you know, they thought of the crack and then thought of like of a crevice, and basically a crevice is just a deep crack. So I was like, but it sounds so much better. Crevice sounds so much better than crack. So I'll have to start. Not crevice, crevasse. Sorry, I was pronouncing it wrong. So crevice, that's another word, but crevasse, kind of a deep, deep crack. So just looking, I'm thinking might be interesting here on top of these, but I don't know. We'll have to see. Or here. That's the thing. It's like, maybe it'll depend on the words that I cut out. So like I said, this was from Magnetic Poetry, and I just stuck it to the back of a cookie sheet, put that cookie sheet on my scanner and scanned it. And so now I can always print this out, and then that way I don't use up the actual magnetic poetry words, even though that could be interesting. So I think I'm gonna cut out, I don't know, just cut out some words. Now you might ask, like, well, why don't I just print out words? You know, this is just a standard font, like looks like Times New Roman or whatever. But I actually like the rectangle, and so when I cut these out, I actually cut out a little line, a little bit of the black all the way around, and so I get that rectangle. And so I get that feel of that magnetic poetry. I feel like my scissors are getting kind of gummed up with glue and tape adhesive. I have to clean them one of these days. Go ahead and cut this into some smaller pieces. So really with the magnetic poetry, it's just another way of kind of having found text. You know, I didn't come up with these words. I just kind of picked them out, had photocopied them. You could do something similar, going through a magazine, finding words, phrases, things that you feel like belong to or or fit with whatever it is that you're thinking about. Okay. That might be a good start. So those 3 words, I think kind of maybe you can go somewhere else, but I like these. These are very, oh, that says explode. I don't want that one. I thought it said explore. But these are cool. Investigate, experiment, embrace. So then the question is, where do they go? So let's maybe move those down here. So it could be some place like this. You know, I've got 3 squares. Oops. So I dropped that one. You know, so it could go through. I don't like that because it kind of covers up the rectangle. Might be interesting here with that magazine. Yeah, I think so. So I like this because it works really well on pages where there's already stuff going on because it brings back some white. And so with that contrast between the white and the black, those words really kind of pop out. Kind of interesting. Right now they're kind of floating on the surface, but that could be fine. Later I might think about if I want them kind of pushed down into the page. Just I've got these other words I've cut out, and I don't want this just to be the only place, and I'll probably look for other words. in that paper, that page that I got, but I might think about where I can. You know what? Let's just take this. So it's kind of interesting to put just like a single word. And so then you get that juxtaposition of an image, a background, and then the word. And then you start to kind of like, oh, this says shadow. It's next to this face. What does that mean? Is there a shadow? Is there, you know, so it's just a little bit unclear. But that ambiguity of that, you know, it's not clear cut. That makes, like, when somebody looks at that, makes them kind of think like, oh, what does that mean? Even for myself, it kind of makes me start to think like, what do I mean? I don't think I'm going to use the word explode, but I like this word ask. Okay. As I was working on this page, of course, I was looking at the little leaf-like shapes that I drew last time. And I started thinking like, oh, you know, maybe I do want to do something to these now, make them stand out a little bit more. And so that's what I was thinking. And then I was like, oh, do I want to just outline them? You know, I like how they stand out, but they don't stand out a lot. But I have these thick black outlines around the rectangles. So maybe having thick black outlines around those could be interesting. Maybe doing like I did back here and using the pencil, the Inktense pencils around it. And so I was thinking maybe a darker blue, maybe both. So I think what I'll do is I'm gonna pull out a slightly thicker pen. So this is an M. I guess it stands for medium. This was an F, a fine point, and then there's also an S, and then an XS. So I guess S stands for superfine. But this is just a little bit thicker than that F, and then I can easily thicken the lines. So the thicker black lines are going to make it stand out. So all of a sudden you can see how that little leaf shape just pops out because it's just thicker. But it also ties in, like I said, with that thick black outline around the rectangles. And then I'll flip it over because remember I wrapped that around so I can do the same thing on the other side of the page. Okay, so kind of guess this kind of turned into a lesson just about found text and how that can be used to help add some meaning, some messages, some ideas, some words to pages. So that's kind of cool. So magnetic poetry, great source, and then of course text from a book or a magazine or newspaper. So anyway, but I think that kind of wraps it up for today. What's really interesting is that I didn't end up with like drastic changes except for like this page here with the text. But just adding a word here and there on a page starts to imply some meaning and some messages and some ideas. So anyway, so I think that kind of is going to wrap it up for day number 11. So yeah, so day number 11. Like I said at the beginning of this live stream today, I'm thinking that I want to find some images of cicadas, just because that idea of the emergence of these these big insects emerging from the ground after 17 years, definitely kind of a cool idea, cool thing, and I think having them in would be a great way to sort of commemorate, the fact that this is happening now. And so anyway. So I think that kind of wraps up for today, and I appreciate you tuning in. So if you got any questions or comments or anything, feel free to let me know in the comments, and I'll be back same time tomorrow, 3 p.m. For day number 12. So thank you so much. And as always, happy creating.